June 15, 2023. 8:42 a.m. Atlanta skies clear as glass. Wealthy developer Anthony Reynolds' Cessna spirals through clouds, smoke trailing its descent. The crash into Baker's soybean farm sends emergency crews racing. Everyone calls his survival miraculous. But his wife Tasha's expression tells another story. When we look at relationships, do we ever truly know what lies in the heart of someone who vows to love us forever? If you haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to become part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Share your location in the comments below. We love seeing how our stories connect people across the world. Sirens wailed through the rural outskirts of Atlanta as emergency vehicles raced toward the plume of black smoke rising from Baker's farm. The morning had begun like any other in this peaceful agricultural community, but at 8:42 a.m., the tranquility shattered when a single-engine Cessna aircraft plummeted from the sky. Farmer Elijah Baker had been checking irrigation lines when he witnessed the small plane descend in a decline quickly motion, smoke trailing behind it like a macabre banner against the clear blue sky. He immediately called emergency services, then jumped into his truck to reach the crash site. "I saw it coming down and knew it wasn't right," Elijah later told investigators. "Planes from the regional airport fly over all the time, but this one was spinning, not gliding. Something was real wrong." The aircraft had carved a deep furrow through rows of young soybean plants before coming to rest in a crumpled heap of metal. By some miracle, the fuel tanks hadn't ruptured into a fireball upon impact, though smoke poured from the damaged engine compartment. When first responders arrived 7 minutes after the crash, they found the pilot, identified as 45-year-old Anthony Reynolds, a prominent Atlanta real estate developer, still strapped in his seat, unconscious but alive. Paramedic Darren Waltz later described the scene. "In my 15 years responding to accidents, I've never seen someone survive a crash like that. The cockpit was crushed on one side, but somehow the pilot's section remained somewhat intact. If that plane had come down just a few degrees steeper or faster, we'd have been recovering a body, not saving a life." The emergency medical team worked quickly to stabilize Anthony, cutting through twisted metal to extract him from the wreckage. His injuries were severe: multiple fractures to his right leg and arm, internal bleeding from a punctured lung, and a significant head trauma that worried the paramedics most. As they loaded him into the ambulance, one of the paramedics noticed something odd about the aircraft's engine compartment, where a piece of metal had broken away during the crash. "Something doesn't look right with the engine mounts," he mentioned to his partner. "Almost looks like they were partially detached before impact." This casual observation would later become a crucial piece of evidence. At Emory University Hospital, the trauma team was ready and waiting when Anthony arrived. Medical staff rushed him into surgery to address the internal bleeding and stabilize his fractures, while hospital administrators attempted to contact his next of kin. According to Anthony's wallet identification, his emergency contact was his wife, Tasha Reynolds. The administrator on duty, Lydia Howell, made the difficult call to inform Tasha of her husband's accident. "Mrs. Reynolds? This is Lydia Howell from Emory University Hospital. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about your husband, Anthony." The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Lydia later noted that Mrs. Reynolds had sounded shocked but remarkably composed, asking precise questions about her husband's condition and estimated survival chances before saying she would come immediately. Detective Jackson Moore of the Atlanta Police Department's Major Crimes Division was assigned to the case. At 49, Moore was a veteran investigator with a reputation for thoroughness and intuition. He had grown up in rural Georgia before joining the Atlanta PD, and over 22 years on the force had developed an uncanny ability to sense when something about a case didn't add up. Standard procedure required police involvement in all aviation incidents until the Federal Aviation Administration could take over, but something about this case kept Moore's attention even after the FAA arrived. Moore entered the hospital waiting room around 11:30 a.m., intending to gather preliminary information before the FAA investigators took control of the scene. He was reviewing the initial report when a striking woman in her early 40s hurried through the automatic doors. Her designer clothes and perfectly styled hair stood in stark contrast to her tear-streaked face. "I need to see my husband, Anthony Reynolds. I was told he was brought here after a plane crash," she said to the reception nurse, her voice breaking with emotion. "Please, I need to know if he's alive." Detective Moore observed as the nurse explained that Anthony was in surgery, and a doctor would provide an update as soon as possible. The woman, who identified herself as Tasha Reynolds, sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come and go in perfect crescendos. Moore approached her gently. "Mrs. Reynolds? I'm Detective Jackson Moore. I'm very sorry about your husband's accident. The doctors are doing everything they can. When you feel ready, I'd like to ask you a few questions about Mr. Reynolds' activities this morning." Tasha looked up, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Of course, Detective. Anything that might help. I still can't believe this is happening." Over the next 20 minutes, Moore learned that Anthony was an experienced pilot with over 1,000 hours of flight time, having earned his license more than 15 years ago. According to Tasha, he flew at least twice a week, weather permitting, and was meticulous about aircraft maintenance. That morning, he'd left their Buckhead mansion around 7:15 a.m. for a routine flight to maintain his skills. He was in perfect health, perfect spirits, Tasha insisted, her manicured hands twisting the handkerchief. He'd been excited about this flight for days. Something about testing new navigation equipment. "He's always so careful. I don't understand how this could happen." Moore noted her use of present tense when referring to her husband, a good sign she believed he would survive. He also couldn't help noticing her immaculate appearance despite the emotional situation, including freshly applied makeup and an expensive-looking bracelet that clinked softly whenever she moved her wrist. The bracelet featured several small charms, a miniature airplane, a heart, and what appeared to be a custom-made platinum initial, T. "Your husband flies regularly, then?" Moore asked, jotting notes. "Since before we met," Tasha confirmed. "It's his passion. His uncle was in the Air Force and taught him about flying when he was young. After his uncle died in a training accident, Anthony became even more dedicated to safety. He treats that plane better than most people treat their children." "And where does he keep the aircraft?" "Atlanta Regional Airport. He has a private hangar there. Number 23, I think. He's had it for about 4 years. Does anyone else have access to the hangar or the aircraft?" Tasha looked surprised by the question. "Just maintenance personnel when scheduled. And I have a spare key at home, but I never use it. I've always been terrified of small planes, ironically enough." She gave a sad little laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Why do you ask? It was an accident, wasn't it?" Moore kept his expression neutral. "Standard questions, Mrs. Reynolds. We need to understand the full picture in any aviation incident." While Tasha waited for news at the hospital, FAA investigators had arrived at the crash site. Their preliminary examination revealed several concerning issues with the aircraft. The engine mounts showed signs of tampering, with bolts that appeared to have been loosened then partially retightened. A critical control cable appeared to have been partially severed, creating a weak point likely to fail under stress but not immediately upon takeoff. Most alarming was the discovery of an unknown substance on several key components, which was collected for laboratory analysis. Lead FAA investigator Camila Rodriguez contacted Detective Moore directly rather than going through official channels, which immediately caught his attention. A 20-year veteran of crash investigations, Rodriguez was not known for jumping to conclusions. "Detective, this wasn't an accident," she said quietly over the phone. "Someone wanted this plane to fail catastrophically once it was airborne. The tampering was sophisticated, designed to pass a pre-flight check but fail once the aircraft was at altitude and under stress. If Mr. Reynolds wasn't such a skilled pilot, he would be dead. We need to treat this as attempted murder." Moore's police instincts, already humming with suspicion, shifted into high gear. "You're certain? Could it have been poor maintenance?" "Absolutely not," Rodriguez replied firmly. "I've been doing this for 2 decades. This was deliberate sabotage by someone who knew enough about aircraft to be dangerous. The engine mounts were loosened in a specific pattern that would cause catastrophic failure only after experiencing the vibrations of takeoff and climb. And the substance we found on several components isn't anything that should be on an aircraft. We're rushing the lab analysis." By late afternoon, Anthony had survived his initial surgery but remained in critical condition. The medical team induced a coma to help his brain recover from trauma. The neurosurgeon, Dr. Eleanor Broadway, explained the situation to Tasha and Detective Moore. The impact caused a severe concussion with some swelling, but thankfully no detectable bleeding in the brain itself. "We've placed him in a medically induced coma to give his brain time to heal. His other injuries, the broken bones and punctured lung, have been stabilized. The next 48 hours will be critical, but given what he survived already, I'm cautiously optimistic." When Tasha was finally allowed to see him, nurses observed her behavior carefully, as is standard procedure in potential criminal cases. One nurse later reported that while Tasha appeared appropriately distraught when hospital staff were directly interacting with her, her demeanor changed subtly when she thought no one was watching. She would be crying 1 minute, then checking her phone with this strange focused expression the next, reported Nurse Kimberly Taylor. When Dr. Broadway told her Mr. Reynolds had survived surgery but remained critical, "I swear I saw something flash across her face that wasn't relief. It was almost like disappointment." Then she composed herself immediately and asked all the right questions about his care. "It was odd enough that I made a note of it." After visiting her husband, Tasha stepped into a hospital stairwell to make a private phone call, unaware that hospital security cameras captured audio as well as video in certain areas for safety reasons. The recording would later reveal a conversation with someone identified only as Layla in her phone contacts. "He survived surgery, but they're not sure if he'll wake up," Tasha whispered. "The doctor said something about brain swelling and keeping him in a coma for now." "No, they haven't said anything about investigating the plane yet, just the usual questions. I don't know if they suspect anything. We should stop talking about this over the phone. I'll keep you posted. We just need to stay calm and stick to the plan." Detective Moore, meanwhile, had begun collecting background information on the Reynolds couple. A financial investigation revealed that Anthony carried a $3.5 million life insurance policy with his wife as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been upgraded just 6 months earlier, doubling the previous coverage amount. Furthermore, Anthony owned several valuable properties independently of his company, all of which would pass to Tasha upon his death. Moore assigned Detective Alicia Freeman to dive deeper into the couple's finances. Freeman discovered that while Anthony's business was thriving, Tasha had recently made several large transfers from their joint accounts to a personal account, then to a business called LD Auto Specialists. When Freeman investigated this business, she found it was a high-end auto repair shop specializing in luxury vehicles, owned by one Layla Diaz. The detective also learned that Anthony had survived 2 other seemingly random accidents in the past 6 months, a severe case of food poisoning that had been attributed to restaurant negligence, and a carbon monoxide leak in their home while Tasha was away visiting family. Neither incident had raised suspicions at the time, but in light of the plane crash, Moore flagged them for further investigation. 3 days after the crash, Anthony regained consciousness. Though groggy and in pain, his first question to the medical staff was about his plane. When Detective Moore was permitted a brief interview, Anthony expressed confusion about the crash. "I don't understand what happened," he said weakly, his voice rough from the breathing tube that had been removed only hours earlier. "I did my usual pre-flight check. Everything seemed normal during takeoff. The weather was perfect, not a cloud in the sky. Then at about 2,000 feet, the controls started fighting me. The engine made this terrible sound, like metal grinding, and I couldn't maintain altitude. I tried to radio for emergency landing clearance, but everything happened so fast. Moore asked carefully, is there anyone who might want to harm you, Mr. Reynolds? Any business rivals or personal enemies? Anthony's brow furrowed. No, nothing like that. I'm generally well liked in the community. My business dealings are always above board. I've made competitors unhappy with winning bids, but nothing that would lead to something like this. After a pause, he added, you don't think this was intentional, do you? Moore kept his response non-committal, not wanting to alarm Anthony or tip off potential suspects if they were monitoring Anthony's visitors. We're exploring all possibilities. Aircraft accidents can have many causes. As Anthony drifted back to sleep, Moore met with his flight instructor, Martin Kemp, in the hospital cafeteria. Martin had taught Anthony to fly 15 years ago and remained a close friend who occasionally flew with him to keep his skills sharp. Tony is obsessive about maintenance and safety, Martin insisted, stirring sugar into his coffee. He would never skip checks or take risks. His uncle was a military pilot who died in a preventable accident, and that affected Tony deeply. He told me once that respecting aircraft maintenance was how he honored his uncle's memory. Martin also mentioned something that caught Moore's attention. Last time we flew together, about 3 weeks ago, Tony mentioned finding something odd during his pre-flight check, a loose fitting that he was certain had been tight during his previous inspection. He had the entire fuel system rechecked by his mechanic afterward. Said he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Moore asked, did his wife ever show interest in his flying? Ever go to the airport with him? Martin considered the question. Tasha? Not really. She seemed supportive but never wanted to fly with him. Said she was terrified of small planes. Though come to think of it, she did come to the hangar once or twice recently when she needed to drop something off for Tony. Said she was getting over her fear by exposing herself to the environment. It struck me as odd at the time, since she'd been so adamant about avoiding planes for all the years I've known them. How long have you known the couple? About 15 years. I was at their wedding, actually. They seemed perfect for each other, still do, really. Tasha's always been the picture of a devoted wife. Supports all his business ventures, hosts charity events at their home, the whole package. Moore made a note to investigate when exactly Tasha had begun showing this new interest in her husband's flying. One more question, Mr. Kemp. Would you say Anthony's piloting skills are above average? Martin smiled proudly. Absolutely. He's a natural in the cockpit. Has excellent instincts and stays cool under pressure. What happened the other day, if it was mechanical failure like they're saying, the fact that he managed to crash land without the plane bursting into flames is nothing short of miraculous. Most pilots with his experience level would have panicked and lost control completely. While Anthony recovered in the hospital, the investigation accelerated. The laboratory analysis of the substance found on the aircraft components came back with surprising results. It wasn't a standard lubricant or adhesive, but contained components commonly found in nail polish, specifically a limited edition shade from a luxury brand called Crimson Secret. Whoever tampered with those components tried to mimic the appearance of proper torque seal. That's the stuff mechanics use to mark properly tightened fasteners so they can see if something comes loose, explained the FAA's Rodriguez. But instead of actual torque seal, they used nail polish of a similar color. A rushed pre-flight check might not catch the difference, especially in dim hangar lighting. Detective Moore immediately requested access to Tasha Reynolds' social media accounts. Within hours, he found what he was looking for, an Instagram post from 2 months earlier showing Tasha at a charity luncheon, her freshly manicured nails prominently displayed. The caption read, "Loving my new signature color, Crimson Secret. Worth every penny." The nail polish matched the substance found on the sabotaged aircraft components. Moore also requested security footage from the regional airport where Anthony kept his plane. The night before the crash, at 11:27 p.m., cameras captured a vehicle matching the description of Tasha's Mercedes SUV entering the private aviation area. The driver used an access card to enter, and the vehicle remained for approximately 43 minutes before departing. The footage was too distant and dark to clearly identify the driver, but the timing and vehicle type added to Moore's growing case. Meanwhile, a different detective had been assigned to discreetly investigate Tasha's background and movements. Through interviews with the couple's social circle, a name kept emerging: Layla Diaz, described as Tasha's best friend since college. Layla owned an auto repair shop specializing in luxury vehicles and lived in a condo purchased with a loan co-signed by Tasha 3 years earlier. One friend of the couple, Vanessa Mitchell, provided particularly interesting information during her interview. Tasha and Layla have been inseparable since college. Sometimes I wonder if Anthony gets jealous of how much time they spend together, but he's never seemed bothered by it. He's just grateful that Tasha has such a close friend. They have these spa weekends together at least once a month, and Tasha's always running over to Layla's place to help with some crisis or another. A deep dive into phone records revealed hundreds of text messages and calls between Tasha and Layla each week, often late at night or when Anthony was known to be away on business. Most intriguing was the discovery of a shared notes app account where the two women appeared to communicate in a simple code, discussing what seemed to be the planning of 3 separate events, referred to only as Attempt 1, Attempt 2, and Final Flight. One such note read, A1 failed due to quick medical response. A2 should appear completely accidental. Timing is critical. Another, dated just weeks before the crash, FF preparations complete. Equipment acquired. Just need access window. Anthony's condition improved enough for him to be moved out of intensive care 1 week after the crash. As he became more lucid, Detective Moore carefully broached the subject of his marriage. Would you say you and your wife have a happy relationship, Mr. Reynolds? Anthony smiled weakly, the movement causing him to wince from the pain of his still healing facial lacerations. Tasha is my world. We've been married for 15 years, and I still feel lucky every day. She's beautiful, smart, supportive, everything I could want in a partner. We've had our rough patches like any couple, but nothing serious. His expression grew concerned. Why do you ask? Just trying to get a complete picture, Moore replied, then changed the subject. Tell me more about your plane. Where do you keep it? Who has access to it? It's at Atlanta Regional in a private hangar. Only I have the key, though the airport has emergency access, of course. Tasha has the spare key at home, but she never uses it. She's afraid of flying, ironically. Or at least she was until recently. She's been trying to overcome her fear, even came with me to the hangar a few times. When did she start trying to overcome this fear? Anthony thought for a moment. About 3 months ago. Said she realized she was missing out on part of my life because of her fear. I was thrilled, to be honest. Always hoped she'd eventually want to fly with me. Moore nodded, making notes. Has she ever been there alone? Perhaps to drop something off for you? Once or twice, maybe. She brought me some paperwork I'd forgotten last month. Anthony shifted painfully in his bed. Detective, you keep asking questions that sound like you suspect foul play. Was my crash not an accident? Moore decided it was time for partial honesty. The FAA found some irregularities with your aircraft that suggest tampering. We don't have all the answers yet, but we're investigating thoroughly. The color drained from Anthony's face. Tampering? But who would, why would? His voice trailed off as he considered the implications. After a long pause, he asked in a near whisper, You don't think Tasha had anything to do with this, do you? Moore maintained his neutral expression. We're looking at all possibilities, Mr. Reynolds. We don't have any conclusions yet. Anthony shook his head firmly, wincing again from the movement. No. Absolutely not. Tasha would never, she loves me. We have a perfect life together. To fully understand the events leading to the crash, we need to go back to where it all began, the first meeting between Anthony Reynolds and Tasha Mitchell in 2007. They met at an Atlanta charity gala benefiting children's education, where Anthony was being honored for his company's scholarship program. Tasha, then a rising interior designer working with several prestigious Atlanta firms, had been invited to the event by clients. Their connection was immediate and intense. Anthony, then 37, had built his real estate development company from scratch after growing up in modest circumstances in South Atlanta. Losing his parents in his early 20s had forced him to become self-reliant, and he credited his success to the influence of his uncle, an Air Force pilot who had taken him under his wing before dying in a training accident when Anthony was just 19. Flying became Anthony's passion and escape from the pressures of business. He earned his pilot's license at 30, finding peace and clarity in the skies that he couldn't experience on the ground. By the time he met Tasha, he was both a successful businessman and an accomplished pilot, though he had never found someone to share his personal life. Tasha presented herself as the perfect complement to Anthony. Elegant, intelligent, and seemingly devoted, she had grown up in a strict household in Savannah, Georgia, where appearances and social standing mattered above all else. Her father, a prominent surgeon, and her mother, a former beauty queen turned charity organizer, had instilled in her the importance of maintaining the right image and making advantageous connections. Her friendship with Layla Diaz had begun in their freshman year at Spelman College, where they were roommates despite coming from very different backgrounds. While Tasha had grown up in privilege, Layla was attending on a full scholarship, the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to support her family. Layla's mechanical aptitude had manifested early. She had been fixing neighborhood cars since she was 14, turning her natural talent into a way to help her mother make ends meet. What Anthony never knew was that Tasha and Layla's relationship had evolved beyond friendship during those college years. Their romantic connection had remained secret due to Tasha's fear of her family's reaction and her personal ambitions in Atlanta's conservative high society. When Tasha met Anthony at the gala, she saw an opportunity for financial security and social advancement that her relationship with Layla could never provide. Though she didn't love Anthony romantically, she genuinely appreciated his kindness and generosity. Their courtship was brief, and they married within a year of meeting. Tasha believed she could maintain her hidden relationship with Layla while playing the role of devoted wife. For Layla, the arrangement was painful but seemingly necessary in a world that wouldn't accept their relationship openly. For many years, this arrangement worked. Anthony's frequent business trips and solo flying excursions gave Tasha plenty of freedom to see Layla. Anthony's business continued to thrive, and the couple became fixtures in Atlanta's social elite. They renovated a mansion in Buckhead, donated generously to charities, and were featured in local magazines as a power couple. Tasha successfully built her interior design business, with Anthony providing connections to wealthy clients renovating properties he had developed. Behind this perfect facade, however, Tasha's double life was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Layla grew resentful of being the secret partner, watching Tasha play the role of devoted wife at public events while their own relationship remained hidden. Meanwhile, Tasha found herself trapped between worlds, unable to leave Anthony without losing her lifestyle and social position, yet unable to fully commit to Layla. The situation grew more complicated when Layla's auto repair business began struggling financially in 2021. Specializing in luxury vehicles had seemed like a good niche, but the pandemic had affected her clientele, and rising rents threatened to force her to close. Tasha began funneling money from her joint accounts with Anthony to keep Layla's business afloat, creating elaborate explanations for the withdrawals when Anthony questioned them. The breaking point came in late 2022, when Anthony decided to purchase a new Cessna aircraft for his personal use. The plane represented a significant investment of time and money, further limiting Tasha's freedom as Anthony wanted her to join him on weekend trips once the plane was delivered. Additionally, Anthony had begun discussing his desire to start a family, something Tasha had successfully postponed for years but could no longer avoid without raising suspicions. "I can't keep living this lie," Tasha confided to Layla during a late-night meeting at Layla's apartment. "He wants children now. Says we're not getting any younger and it's time to build our family. I've run out of excuses." "Then leave him," Layla urged, taking Tasha's hands in hers. "We can finally be together openly. I know it would mean giving up the mansion and the society parties, but wouldn't it be worth it? To be free?" Tasha pulled away, pacing the small living room. "You don't understand. A divorce would ruin everything. I'd get half at best, and my reputation would be destroyed. My business depends on connections through Anthony. And you've seen the prenup. If I'm unfaithful, I get almost nothing. So what's your plan? Stay trapped forever?" Tasha stopped pacing, her expression hardening. "No. There's another way. A way where I get everything, the money, the properties, the social standing, and we can be together." It was in this conversation that the first plan to eliminate Anthony began taking shape. If he died in what appeared to be an accident, Tasha would inherit everything, maintain her social position as the grieving widow, and eventually could bring Layla into her life as a supportive friend who helped her through her loss. In January of 2023, Anthony became violently ill after a dinner prepared by Tasha. He was hospitalized for severe food poisoning, which doctors attributed to contaminated seafood. What no one suspected was that Tasha had deliberately added a tasteless substance to his meal, the first attempt to free herself from the marriage. Anthony's robust health and quick medical attention saved his life. "You used too little," Layla said when they discussed the failed attempt. "Next time has to look completely natural. No trace of foul play." The second attempt came in April, when Tasha manipulated the gas line to their home heating system while Anthony was sleeping and she was supposedly visiting her parents. A faulty detector failed to alert Anthony immediately, but a smart home system eventually detected the carbon monoxide and triggered an alarm that saved his life. The incident was dismissed as an unfortunate malfunction. After these failed attempts, Tasha and Layla developed a more sophisticated plan targeting Anthony's aircraft. Layla's mechanical knowledge from running her auto shop made her the perfect accomplice. They researched aircraft failures that could appear accidental, focusing on issues that would manifest after takeoff rather than during pre-flight checks. "The engine mounts and control cables are critical," Layla explained, showing Tasha diagrams she'd printed from aviation maintenance websites. "If we loosen these specific bolts just enough, they'll hold during takeoff but fail under the stress of flight. And these cables, if we weaken them at strategic points, they'll snap when he maneuvers at altitude." In the weeks leading up to the crash, Tasha began accompanying Anthony to the airport occasionally, claiming she wanted to overcome her fear of small aircraft. This gave her the opportunity to familiarize herself with the hangar layout and security measures. She also made note of Anthony's pre-flight check routine, identifying potential weaknesses. "He checks everything visually," she told Layla. "But he relies on the torque seal to confirm the bolts are properly tightened. If we can mimic that seal, he won't think to test each bolt individually." "We can use this," Layla replied, showing Tasha a bottle of nail polish. "The color is nearly identical to aviation torque seal. He won't notice the difference unless he's specifically looking for tampering." Their plan was methodical and calculated. Tasha would access the hangar using her spare key while Anthony was asleep, make the necessary sabotage, and apply the nail polish to mimic proper maintenance markings. The damage would be designed to cause catastrophic failure once the aircraft was at altitude, making survival virtually impossible. Have you ever wondered if someone close to you is hiding deadly intentions behind their smile? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As the investigation progressed into its second week, laboratory analysis confirmed that the nail polish found on the aircraft components matched the specific shade Tasha had featured in her social media posts. More damning was the discovery that the polish contained microscopic glass particles, a signature feature of that particular luxury brand, which created a distinctive pattern under analysis. "It's a unique formulation," the lab technician explained to Moore. This particular brand adds these glass particles to create a sparkle effect in certain lighting. They're like a fingerprint, highly distinctive and impossible to replicate accidentally. Airport security footage provided another crucial breakthrough. While the nighttime video hadn't clearly shown the driver of the Mercedes, a different camera caught a reflection in the vehicle's window as it passed under a light. Enhanced by forensic video specialists, the image revealed a woman wearing a distinctive bracelet, the same unusual design Tasha wore during her hospital visits. The charm bracelet is visible for less than half a second, the video analyst told more. But the enhancement clearly shows the airplane charm and what appears to be the letter T. We compared it to photos from Mrs. Reynolds' social media, and it's identical to one she's worn consistently for the past year. Detective Moore also discovered that Anthony had installed a small security camera in his hangar 6 months earlier after noticing tools occasionally being moved. The camera uploaded footage to a cloud storage account that Anthony accessed through his phone. Moore obtained a warrant for the account and found footage from the night before the crash. The video showed someone entering the hangar using a key at 11:32 p.m. Although the person wore a hooded sweatshirt that obscured their face, the hangar lights revealed glimpses of a female figure moving with confidence around the aircraft. Most tellingly, when the person reached up to access a compartment above the wing, a familiar bracelet slid down their wrist, catching the light and creating a distinctive clinking sound as the charms collided. The audio perfectly matched the sound of Tasha's bracelet that Moore had noted during their first meeting at the hospital. The footage showed the intruder working methodically for over 30 minutes, loosening critical bolts, then applying what appeared to be nail polish from a small bottle to mimic maintenance markings. The person also accessed the control cables, using what looked like wire cutters to partially sever strands in a way that wouldn't be immediately visible. Before leaving, the saboteur carefully cleaned up any evidence, even wiping down surfaces for fingerprints. Further investigation revealed that Layla's auto repair shop contained several aviation maintenance tools that had no legitimate reason to be there. A search warrant executed at the shop uncovered proper aircraft torque seal hidden in a supply cabinet, along with diagrams of Cessna engine components printed from websites specializing in aircraft maintenance. She's been researching this for months, Detective Freeman told Moore after analyzing Layla's computer. Internet history shows searches for aircraft failures that look accidental, how to sabotage an airplane, and Cessna maintenance weak points. She cleared her browser history, but the data was still retrievable from the hard drive. GPS data from Tasha's phone placed her within half a mile of the airport on the night before the crash, contradicting her claim that she had been home all evening. Her phone had been switched to airplane mode during the exact time period when the Mercedes was inside the airport perimeter, only reconnecting to the network after leaving the area. The most revealing evidence came from a review of text messages between Tasha and Layla in the weeks preceding the crash. While they had been careful to avoid explicit statements, their communications contained clear references to their plans. The final flight arrangement is confirmed for the 15th, Tasha had written. Everything needs to be in place the night before. Layla's response, I've practiced the procedure. It won't be detectable during routine checks, but will fail under stress at altitude. On the morning of the crash, just minutes after news of the incident would have broken, Layla texted Tasha a single question mark. Tasha responded, in progress. We'll call when confirmed. 2 weeks after the crash, Anthony had recovered enough to have longer conversations. Detective Moore decided it was time to share his suspicions more directly. Mr. Reynolds, I need to ask you some difficult questions about your relationship with your wife, Moore began gently. Have you noticed any changes in Tasha's behavior recently? Any unusual interest in your finances or life insurance? Anthony frowned. No, nothing like that. Tasha handles a lot of our day-to-day finances anyway, so it wouldn't be unusual for her to ask about those things. Why would you ask? We've uncovered evidence suggesting the tampering with your aircraft was not random. It appears to have been carefully planned by someone with access to your plane and knowledge of your flight schedule. Anthony's expression changed from confusion to horror as the implication sank in. You can't possibly think Tasha had anything to do with this. She loves me. We have a perfect marriage. I understand this is difficult to consider, Moore continued carefully. But I need to ask, have there been any unusual financial transactions recently? Large withdrawals or transfers? Anthony hesitated. There have been some larger withdrawals than usual over the past year. Tasha said they were for her business, materials for client projects, advance payments to contractors. I didn't question it much. She's always been good with money. Moore showed Anthony select pieces of evidence, including the security footage from the hangar and text messages between Tasha and Layla. Anthony's hands trembled as he viewed the materials, his face growing increasingly pale. There must be some explanation, he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. This can't be what it looks like. There's something else you should know, Moore added gently. We've uncovered evidence of a long-term romantic relationship between your wife and Layla Diaz. Anthony sat in stunned silence for several minutes, his medical monitors showing an elevated heart rate as he processed this revelation. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. 15 years of marriage. I gave her everything. I never once suspected. He looked up at Moore, his eyes reflecting profound betrayal. She tried to kill me. Not once, but 3 times. The food poisoning in January, the gas leak in April, those weren't accidents either, were they? We believe they were earlier attempts, Moore confirmed. We're reopening investigations into both incidents. Anthony closed his eyes, his breathing labored from emotion rather than his injuries. All this time, I thought we were happy. I thought she loved me the way I loved her. After a long pause, he asked, what happens now? We have enough evidence for arrest warrants, Moore explained. With your permission, we'd like to make the arrest here, during her next visit. It's a controlled environment, and we can ensure your safety. Anthony nodded slowly. Do what you need to do. I want to be there. I need to see her face when you confront her with what she's done. The next day, Tasha arrived for her regular afternoon visit, carrying flowers and a bag of Anthony's favorite books. She wore a somber navy dress that suggested appropriate concern while still highlighting her figure, and her signature bracelet clinked softly as she arranged the flowers beside Anthony's bed. Detective Moore and 2 officers waited in an adjoining room while Anthony engaged Tasha in conversation from his hospital bed. A hidden microphone captured their exchange. The doctors say I might be released next week, Anthony told her. They're calling my survival a miracle. Tasha smiled, though the expression didn't reach her eyes. That's wonderful news, honey. I've been so worried. The house feels empty without you. She touched his arm gently. I've been planning a special homecoming dinner. Something simple that won't upset your stomach. Anthony watched her carefully. The police have been asking a lot of questions about the crash, he continued. They seem to think it wasn't an accident. A flash of tension crossed Tasha's face before she composed herself. That's ridiculous. Who would want to hurt you? That's exactly what I've been wondering, Anthony replied quietly. Who would benefit from my death, Tasha? Before she could respond, Detective Moore entered the room with the 2 officers. Tasha Reynolds, we have a warrant for your arrest for the attempted murder of Anthony Reynolds, he announced formally. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Tasha's reaction shifted from shock to calculated calm as Moore read her rights. She glanced at Anthony, who was watching her with devastated eyes, then straightened her posture and lifted her chin defiantly. I don't know what you think you know, she said coldly, but you're making a terrible mistake. As officers handcuffed Tasha, Anthony asked the question that had been tormenting him, why, Tasha? Why try to kill me instead of just asking for a divorce? Tasha looked at him with an expression devoid of remorse. A divorce would have given me half. Your death would have given me everything. After a pause, she added with chilling finality, "You were never supposed to survive." One of the officers escorting Tasha noticed her attempting to access her phone as they led her from the room. He confiscated the device immediately, discovering she had been attempting to send a message to Layla, "They know. Get out now." The warning came too late. Layla was arrested simultaneously at her auto shop by Detective Freeman and another team of officers. Unlike Tasha, she quickly crumbled under questioning, providing a full confession in exchange for consideration during sentencing. She revealed the entire timeline of their relationship and their murder attempts, explaining that Tasha had promised they would build a new life together using Anthony's fortune once he was out of the picture. It was her idea, all of it, Layla insisted during her recorded confession. "I loved her so much I would have done anything for her." She said once Anthony was gone, we could finally be together openly after a respectable period of mourning. She had it all planned out, how she'd gradually introduce me to her social circle as the supportive friend helping the widow through her grief. Eventually, we'd reveal our relationship, and no one would suspect anything. Layla's confession provided crucial details about all 3 murder attempts. For the food poisoning incident, Tasha had acquired a plant-based toxin through online dark web sources that Layla had helped her access. The carbon monoxide attempt had been planned during a weekend when Anthony was home alone, with Tasha establishing an alibi by visiting her parents while Layla made the necessary alterations to the gas line. And for the plane sabotage, Layla had provided both the technical knowledge and the specialized tools needed to ensure catastrophic failure while making it appear accidental. "We chose the plane because Anthony was so confident in his flying abilities," Layla explained. Tasha said even if something went wrong, he'd think he could handle it until it was too late. And a plane crash at altitude would leave little evidence of tampering, especially if the aircraft burned on impact. In the months that followed, Anthony underwent extensive physical rehabilitation while also trying to heal from the profound emotional trauma of his wife's betrayal. He required multiple surgeries to repair his shattered leg, and worked with therapists to regain strength and mobility. The head injury left him with occasional migraines and some short-term memory issues, though doctors expected these symptoms to diminish over time. The psychological wounds proved far more difficult to address. Anthony struggled with depression and trust issues, questioning every relationship in his life. He began seeing a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, trying to understand how he could have missed the signs of Tasha's deception for so many years. "I keep replaying every moment of our marriage," he told his therapist during one session. "Looking for clues I should have seen. Were there signs? Was I just blind to them because I wanted to believe she loved me?" The legal case against Tasha and Layla proceeded rapidly, with overwhelming evidence supporting the charges of conspiracy and attempted murder. Prosecutors built a meticulous timeline of their planning and execution, from the initial discussions to the actual sabotage attempts. During the trial, expert witnesses explained exactly how the sabotage had been executed. Tasha had used her spare key to access the hangar the night before the planned flight. Following instructions prepared by Layla, she had loosened critical engine mount bolts just enough that they would fail under the stress of flight, but not so much that they would be obvious during pre-flight checks. She had then applied nail polish to mimic the appearance of proper torque seal, a technique suggested by Layla based on her automotive experience. The prosecution also presented evidence linking Tasha to the previous attempts on Anthony's life. Investigators had found traces of the same tasteless poison in a hidden compartment of Tasha's vanity that had caused Anthony's food poisoning. Additionally, home security footage revealed Tasha tampering with the gas line before her supposed trip to visit family. Financial records told an equally damning story. Tasha had increased Anthony's life insurance policy 6 months before the first murder attempt, and had made detailed plans for managing his assets after his death. She had even consulted with financial advisors about investment strategies for the expected windfall, describing it as inheritance planning. Most disturbing to the jury were the text messages and notes exchanged between Tasha and Layla as they planned each attempt, discussing Anthony's potential death with cold detachment. "If A1 doesn't work, we move to A2," Tasha had written. "We have the time to be patient and get this right." Layla's response: "Whatever it takes. One day we'll look back on all this from our beach house and laugh about how we earned our freedom." The defense attempted to portray Layla as the mastermind who had manipulated a vulnerable Tasha, but this strategy collapsed when prosecutors produced love letters spanning 15 years that showed both women had been active and willing participants in the deception. In one letter, written just weeks before the plane crash, Tasha had declared, "Soon we won't have to hide anymore. Soon I'll be free, wealthy, and all yours." Throughout the trial, Tasha maintained a facade of innocence, claiming the evidence had been misinterpreted or fabricated. She insisted her relationship with Layla had been purely platonic until recently, and suggested Anthony's business rivals might have arranged the attempts on his life. The jury wasn't convinced. After 4 weeks of testimony and evidence presentation, they deliberated for less than 5 hours before returning guilty verdicts for both women. Tasha, maintaining her innocence despite the overwhelming evidence, received 35 years in prison for multiple counts of attempted murder and conspiracy. Layla, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received 15 years. During sentencing, the judge addressed Tasha directly, "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case that exhibited such calculated cruelty. You shared your husband's life and home for 15 years while systematically planning his murder. The cold-blooded nature of your actions, particularly the deliberate sabotage of an aircraft that could have endangered others besides your husband, merits the maximum sentence allowed by law." Anthony's physical recovery progressed better than doctors had initially expected. Within 6 months, he was walking with only a slight limp, though he continued to suffer occasional headaches and fatigue from his head injury. The emotional wounds proved more difficult to heal. Trust, once broken so completely, was not easily rebuilt. Unable to face flying again, Anthony sold his aircraft and donated the proceeds to a charity supporting victims of domestic violence. He sold the Buckhead mansion as well, unable to live in the home he had shared with Tasha. The memories haunted every room: dinner parties they had hosted, holidays they had celebrated, intimate moments he had believed were genuine but now recognized as performance. He redirected his energy toward his business and began a foundation to educate people about the warning signs of deceptive relationships. The Anthony Reynolds Foundation provided resources for people to recognize potential dangers in their relationships and offered support for survivors of similar betrayals. The case received significant media coverage, dubbed the Atlanta plane plot by news outlets. Many who had known the couple expressed shock and disbelief, having perceived them as the perfect couple. Some friends admitted in interviews that they had noticed unusual closeness between Tasha and Layla but had never suspected a romantic relationship, let alone a murder conspiracy. "They were always together," one friend told a journalist. "But in Atlanta's social circles, it's common for women to have close friendships. No one thought anything of it. Tasha played her role perfectly, the devoted wife who adored her successful husband. We all believed it." 1 year after the crash, Anthony received a letter from Tasha in prison. Unlike her demeanor during the trial, where she had maintained a facade of innocence, the letter revealed her true feelings. "I don't regret what I did, only that I failed. 15 years of my life wasted playing the devoted wife while hiding who I really am and who I really love. You survived by pure luck, but in a way, you'll never really recover from knowing the truth, that the person who shared your bed for all those years was counting the days until you were gone. The only authentic thing between us was my contempt for how easily you were fooled." Anthony didn't respond to the letter. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his life. He found purpose in speaking to groups about his experience, helping others recognize the sometimes subtle signs of deception in relationships. He established a scholarship fund for engineering students specializing in aircraft safety systems, honoring the memory of his uncle while creating something positive from his own near-death experience. In interviews, Anthony often reflected on the dual miracle of his survival, both the physical feat of surviving the crash and the fortune of discovering the truth about his wife before she could make another attempt on his life. "We often miss the warning signs because we don't want to see them," he would tell audiences. Love can blind us to danger, especially when it comes from the person we trust most. But I've learned that real love doesn't calculate profit and loss. It doesn't see people as means to an end. Real love values the other person's life above all else. The story of Anthony Reynolds reminds us that sometimes the greatest dangers lie not in the skies, but in the hearts of those closest to us. It forces us to question how well we truly know the people we let into our lives, and whether we would recognize betrayal if it were hiding behind the face of love. The truth behind closed doors can only come to light when we have the courage to face it. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. Leave a like so others can see this story and gain awareness. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Anthony's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice. Let's reconstruct the timeline of events on the night of June 14, 2023, the night before the crash. Anthony Reynolds had returned from his office around 7:30 p.m., exhausted from a day of meetings but excited about his planned flight the following morning. The weather forecast promised perfect flying conditions, and he had recently installed new navigation equipment he was eager to test. Tasha had prepared dinner, Anthony's favorite steak and roasted vegetables, and they had shared a bottle of wine while discussing their days. To Anthony, it had seemed like any other evening in their 15-year marriage. He had no way of knowing that Tasha was mentally rehearsing the steps of the plan she would execute once he was asleep. "I think I'll turn in early," Anthony had said around 10 p.m. "Want to get a good night's sleep before my flight." Tasha had kissed him goodnight, her lips curved in a smile that revealed nothing of her intentions. "Sleep well, honey. I'll be up in a little while. Just want to finish this design proposal for the Westmoreland project." She had waited in the home office, watching a decorating show on her tablet with the sound low, until she was certain Anthony was asleep. The master bedroom was equipped with a sleep monitoring system that connected to their smart home, a gadget Anthony had purchased to track his rest patterns. When the app showed he had entered deep sleep around 11 p.m., Tasha went into action. First, she changed from her loungewear into dark jeans and a hoodie, pulling her hair back and covering it with a baseball cap. She retrieved Anthony's spare hanger key from the kitchen drawer where he kept duplicate keys, slipping it into her pocket. She sent a quick text to Layla, "Proceeding now. We'll update when complete." Tasha moved through their large house quietly, though she knew Anthony was unlikely to wake. Years of marriage had taught her his sleep patterns. Once asleep, he rarely stirred before morning, especially after wine with dinner. She slipped out through the garage, taking her Mercedes SUV rather than her more recognizable convertible. The drive to Atlanta Regional Airport took approximately 20 minutes. She parked in a public lot first, using the time to pull on latex gloves and check that she had all the necessary tools in her bag, the specialized wrenches and screwdrivers Layla had provided, the bottle of Crimson Secret nail polish, and a small flashlight with a red filter to preserve her night vision while working. At 11:27 p.m., security cameras captured her Mercedes entering the private aviation area. She used Anthony's access card to raise the security gate, then drove directly to Hangar 23. The area was quiet at that hour, with only occasional security patrols that Layla had helped her time by observing the pattern over several evenings. Inside the hangar, Tasha worked methodically, following the detailed instructions Layla had prepared. She knew exactly which components to target: the engine mounts that would experience maximum stress during flight, the control cables that would break at precisely the wrong moment, and various fasteners critical to the aircraft's structural integrity. For each component, she loosened the bolts or partially severed the cables, then carefully applied nail polish matching the color of proper torque seal. Under normal hangar lighting, even a careful pilot would have difficulty distinguishing the fake seal from the genuine article. She worked with surprising competence for someone with no formal mechanical training, having practiced each step repeatedly under Layla's guidance using mock-ups in the auto shop's back room. Throughout the process, Tasha maintained a calm, focused demeanor. There were no signs of hesitation or remorse as she methodically sabotaged the aircraft that would carry her husband into the sky the next morning. She had compartmentalized her actions completely, seeing them as necessary steps toward her freedom rather than attempts to kill a man who loved her. At one point, her bracelet slid down her wrist as she reached into a tight space above the wing, the charms clinking softly in the quiet hangar. The sound, captured by Anthony's security camera, would later become a crucial piece of evidence. She pushed it back up without a second thought, unaware that this distinctive accessory would help seal her fate. After 43 minutes of careful work, Tasha completed the sabotage. She double-checked each targeted component, ensuring the damage was sufficient to cause catastrophic failure but subtle enough to escape detection during a routine pre-flight check. She wiped down any surfaces she had touched, removed a single strand of hair that had fallen onto the pilot's seat, and carefully restored all tools and equipment to their exact positions. Before leaving, she took one final look around the hangar, ensuring everything appeared untouched. The Cessna waited silently in the dim light, giving no indication of the deadly modifications it had just received. Tasha felt a moment of cold satisfaction as she locked the hangar door behind her. In her mind, by this time tomorrow, she would be a wealthy widow beginning her period of well-performed grief. The drive home was uneventful. She parked in their garage shortly after midnight, slipped back into the house, and changed into her nightclothes. After hiding the tools in a compartment behind her closet's false panel, she texted Layla, "Complete. Everything in place." Then she washed her face, applied her usual nighttime skin care products, and slid into bed beside her sleeping husband. Anthony stirred slightly as she settled in. "Everything okay?" he murmured, half asleep. "Everything's perfect," she whispered. "Just lost track of time with work. Go back to sleep." As Anthony drifted back to sleep, Tasha lay awake beside him, mentally rehearsing the role she would play the next day, the devastated widow whose life had been shattered by a tragic accident. Eventually, she too fell asleep, undisturbed by conscience or second thoughts about the deadly plan she had set in motion. The morning of June 15 dawned clear and bright. Anthony woke at 6 a.m., excited about his planned flight. He showered and dressed while Tasha prepared breakfast, playing the role of supportive wife with practiced ease. "Perfect flying weather," he commented, checking his weather app over coffee and toast. "Not a cloud in the sky." "Be careful up there," Tasha replied, kissing his cheek. "Text me when you land." "Always do," he promised, having no idea that this ordinary exchange might be their last conversation. Anthony left for the airport around 7:15 a.m., his pre-flight routine as methodical as always. He arrived at the hangar by 7:30, giving himself plenty of time for a thorough check of the aircraft before his planned 8:30 takeoff. He began with a visual inspection of the exterior, checking control surfaces, fuel caps, and the landing gear. Nothing appeared amiss to his experienced eye. Next came the interior checks, instruments, controls, electrical systems. Again, everything seemed normal. Had he examined the engine mounts with specialized equipment, or tested each fastener individually for proper torque, he might have discovered the sabotage. But like most pilots, he relied on visual inspection and the presence of torque seal to confirm that components had been properly secured during maintenance. The nail polish Tasha had applied perfectly mimicked the appearance of this seal under hangar lighting. The only potential warning came when Anthony thought one of the control cables felt slightly different during his control checks. He spent an extra moment testing it, moving the yoke back and forth, but the controls responded normally. After a moment's hesitation, he dismissed his concern as imagination. This split-second decision to continue despite that faint unease would nearly cost him his life. Anthony completed his pre-flight checklist, filed his flight plan for a short practice flight around the Atlanta area, and taxied to the runway. Takeoff was smooth and uneventful. The Cessna climbed steadily through the clear morning air, reaching 2,000 feet as Anthony banked gently to begin his planned route. It was at this moment, approximately 8:40 a.m., that the sabotage began to take effect. The combination of altitude, engine vibration, and the stress of the turn caused the first engine mount bolt to fail completely. The engine shifted slightly, creating increased vibration that put additional stress on the remaining mounts. Anthony felt the change immediately, a new vibration pattern that experienced pilots recognize as a potential problem. He reduced power and began a gentle turn back toward the airport, radioing the tower, Atlanta Regional, "This is Cessna 873 Alfa Romeo, experiencing some unusual vibration. Requesting priority return to the field." The tower acknowledged his request and cleared him for an immediate return. Had the sabotage been limited to the engine mounts alone, Anthony might have made it back safely. But as he banked the aircraft again, the partially severed control cable finally snapped under tension, drastically reducing his ability to control the plane's attitude. At 8:42 a.m., with the airport still several miles away, Anthony found himself fighting increasingly unresponsive controls as the Cessna began to descend in a spiral pattern. The remaining engine mounts failed in quick succession, causing the engine to shift dramatically and further compromise the aircraft's aerodynamics. Witnesses on the ground described seeing the small plane trailing smoke as it spiraled downward. Farmer Elijah Baker, working his soybean field, watched in horror as the aircraft descended toward his property. He would later tell investigators, the pilot was fighting it all the way down. You could see the plane trying to level out multiple times, but then it would slip back into that spiral. Whoever was at the controls was doing everything humanly possible to land that thing. Anthony's extensive experience and natural calm under pressure allowed him to maintain partial control despite the catastrophic failures. Rather than panicking or freezing, he systematically tried different control inputs, finding that certain combinations of throttle, rudder, and the remaining responsive control surfaces allowed him to somewhat flatten the descent spiral. In the final moments before impact, he managed to reduce the rate of descent and adjust the aircraft's attitude to distribute the impact forces more evenly. This last-second maneuver, combined with the relatively soft soybean field that absorbed some of the impact energy, created just enough survivable space in the cockpit. The crash itself was violent. The aircraft's nose dug into the soft earth, causing the Cessna to flip once before coming to rest on its crushed left side. The impact sheared off both wings and crumpled the cockpit around Anthony. But somehow, the passenger compartment maintained just enough structural integrity to prevent him from being crushed completely. Emergency services arrived quickly, alerted by multiple 911 calls from witnesses. The first responders found Anthony unconscious but with detectable vital signs, a miracle given the condition of the aircraft. Their rapid response and skilled extraction from the wreckage gave him the chance at survival that Tasha had been so certain he wouldn't have. At their Buckhead home, Tasha received the call she had been waiting for, though not with the outcome she had expected. When the hospital administrator informed her that Anthony had survived the crash and was in surgery, she had to quickly pivot from her prepared grief performance to the role of relieved yet concerned wife. She called Layla immediately afterward, slipping into a private stairwell at home before the police arrived to escort her to the hospital. "He survived the crash," she hissed into the phone. "I don't know how, but he's alive. They've taken him to Emory. This wasn't supposed to happen." "Stay calm," Layla urged. "Plane crashes have a high fatality rate even for survivors. Internal injuries, complications, there's still a good chance nature will take its course. And if it doesn't? If he recovers? Then we wait and try again. He can't suspect anything. No one can prove anything." But they had underestimated both Anthony's will to live and Detective Moore's investigative instincts. Their careful planning had accounted for almost everything except the remarkable series of coincidences that would expose their plot, Anthony's piloting skill that allowed him to survive what should have been a fatal crash, the paramedics' casual observation about the engine mounts, the security camera Anthony had installed months earlier, and the distinctive nail polish that created an unmistakable forensic link to Tasha. The jury deliberation was brief, with the weight of evidence leaving little room for doubt. In the crowded courtroom, as the guilty verdicts were read, Anthony watched his wife's face finally reveal the truth he had been unable to see for 15 years. The mask of devoted wife fell away completely, replaced by cold fury at having failed in her ultimate goal. When asked if she wished to make a statement before sentencing, Tasha stood, elegant even in her prison attire. "I played my role perfectly for 15 years, she said, addressing Anthony rather than the judge. "I gave you the wife you wanted, the social standing you needed, the perfect partner for your perfect life. Not once did you see the real me. Not once did you question whether my smiles were genuine or my affection was real. You saw what you wanted to see, and that made you the perfect mark. My only regret is that I'm standing here today instead of collecting your life insurance." The courtroom fell silent at this cold declaration. Anthony, who had maintained his composure throughout the trial, finally allowed a single tear to fall. Not for the wife he had lost, he had already mourned that illusion, but for the 15 years of his life built on a foundation of lies. The media dubbed Tasha, the Ice Queen of Atlanta, for her calculated demeanor throughout the trial and her chilling final statement. News coverage focused on the contrast between her public persona as a devoted wife and her private plotting of her husband's murder. Psychologists analyzed the case on television, discussing the disturbing capacity of some individuals to compartmentalize their lives so completely that they can share intimate moments with someone while simultaneously planning their death. Anthony's road to recovery was long and difficult. Physical therapy helped him regain most of his mobility, though the severe fractures in his right leg left him with a permanent limp. Cognitive therapy addressed the effects of his traumatic brain injury, helping him manage the occasional memory lapses and concentration issues that persisted after the crash. The emotional healing proved more challenging. In addition to the trauma of the crash itself, Anthony had to process the profound betrayal by the person he had trusted most. He worked with therapists specializing in relational trauma, gradually rebuilding his capacity to trust others while acknowledging that he would never view relationships with the same innocence again. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully trust someone again," he admitted in a rare interview 6 months after the trial. "But I refuse to let Tasha's betrayal define the rest of my life. She took 15 years from me. She doesn't get to take my future too." Anthony found unexpected support from Martin Kemp, his former flight instructor who had become a steadfast friend throughout the ordeal. Martin helped Anthony work through his newfound fear of flying by taking him on as a passenger in his own aircraft, gradually helping him reclaim the joy he had once found in the skies. Though Anthony never returned to piloting himself, these flights helped him face his trauma rather than avoiding it entirely. He also found purpose in helping others recognize the warning signs he had missed. His foundation developed educational materials about coercive and deceptive relationships, particularly targeting successful professionals who, like Anthony, might be vulnerable to partners who see them as means to financial gain rather than genuine companions. 1 year after the crash, Anthony stood before an audience of domestic violence survivors and support professionals, sharing his story publicly for the first time. "I thought I knew what love was," he told them. "I thought I had built a life with someone who shared my dreams and values. What I didn't understand was that I was living with an actress who saw our marriage as her greatest performance. Every anniversary dinner, every intimate conversation, every moment of supposed connection, all part of an elaborate deception leading toward my planned death." He paused, looking out at the audience. "People ask me if there were signs I missed. There were, but they were subtle. The way she would check her phone immediately after I left a room. The convenient girls' weekends that always seemed to align with my business trips. The questions about my life insurance that seemed innocent at the time. Most tellingly, the fact that after 15 years together, she still maintained parts of her life that were completely separate from ours." Anthony continued, his voice growing stronger. "I'm not telling you this to make you paranoid about your relationships. Most people are not living with someone plotting their murder. But I am urging you to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. To ask questions when answers seem too convenient. And most importantly, to understand that real love is transparent. Real love doesn't require elaborate performances or separate lives. Real love, even with its normal ups and downs, doesn't feel like you're living with a stranger. The truth behind closed doors can only come to light when we have the courage to face it. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. Leave a like so others can see this story and gain awareness. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Anthony's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice.